Hey, it's me, James. Today I'll be talking about my creative follow-up for the procedural generation assignment. So where we left off last, I followed the Brachy's trifecta, and by the end of it, we had a landmass region that we could generate, and then gradient colors that were kind of assigned and changed color based off of the the height and position on the landmass. We added octaves and seed to add variety to our landmass, and we started adding in a structure that would allow us to create preset biomes to our different regions. So where I wanted to go with this creative edition is first I wanted to create multiple regions instead of just one. And then second, I wanted to have different region presets similar to like different biomes you would see in Minecraft or other games that like have different terrain types. And then I wanted to generate towns and roads at random points between the different. So jumping into a demo for this creative presentation. So first off, when we look in here, we'll see that instead of seeing a mesh generator, we now have this terrain generator. And basically, this just sits on a spot higher than the mesh generators, and basically kind of oversees them, and generates multiple of them. If we look at our terrain generator, we'll see stuff that we saw before on the mesh generator, the size, and we can see that we have a prefab for our mesh generator, and then we can see that we have region presets, and basically these are going to act as our biomes when we generate our regions. So right now we're generating 6 regions, and because we're generating one for both the X and the Z, we'll see 6 times 6, we'll see 36 regions being spawned. So you can see off of our spawn, we've got a number of regions. You can see we've got some plains, we've got more of like a desert, and then we've got our mountains that match up to our presets. Now, if I adjust this cohesion value, a 0 basically sets us at a random chance, or basically for every region you have an equal number based off of the chance variable on each of the presets to spawn the region. But if we increase our cohesion value, the system will try to favor grouping our regions together with similar ones. So you can see we've got a number more groupings. Like we've got larger patches of plains, larger patches of deserts. We've got a few collections of rocks. So if we see this again, we'll see something similar. This one we have like we have some larger patches of our different rocks. If we want to move a step deeper here, what I want to show off last before we get into a little bit more code is that if I go down to my terrain generator, we'll see all of our regions underneath. But if I go down into each region, you'll see that what we have what looks to be a number of nodes. So these nodes are objects that are placed at the location of each of the vertices, and by default I have them all deactivated. But if I go to this node manager script, which is on top of each of our regions, I can activate them all, and you can see we've got a number of different dots. I'm going to show off how this works on a mountain tile, just so you can see more so. They're spread across the mountain on both the X, Y, and Z. Now the thing about the nodes, this allows us to maybe make some more deeper edits to our objects, and if and actually like use them as a point of reference. I didn't get to actually editing the mesh, but what I can do is I can click on one, and you see it turns blue, and I can click on like another one, it'll turn blue. And basically, I've basically set a designation to designate these as quote unquote waypoints, and if I click again, I will draw a line between them. Now, this is really nothing more than like the line is nothing more than like a proof of concept that like if I actually got into editing the mesh, then I could basically edit the position of the. I could use pathfinding and edit positions along the vertices of nodes and basically create like a clean-ish pathway between different points. So jumping into the code, we'll give a brief overview. So we'll jump into our train generator script. So you'll see a lot of stuff here that we saw inside our mesh generator, and I won't get into that because nothing has really changed on that side of things. But you can see we have our region preset. We have our number of variables. When we start off, we create a chance table, which basically what it does, it scales the chance values that we have on all of our regions and puts them to a scale of puts them on a scale of 100 that we can then use to pull from, and then we set our set the top and bottom of our probability scale, basically the range that if a random number hits will spawn that region. And if we get down for generating each region, we're cycling through the Z and the X. We're creating a new region. We're rolling a D100. If our cohesion value is high or is greater than 1, basically what we're going to do is we're going to get the last region that we spawned, and we're going to take that difference along a D100 scale, and we're basically going to roll against it a number of times. Before we cycle through and choose a region at random, what we're going to do, we're going to give a little bit more preference to what we spawned before, so we have a little bit more compact grouping. And then at the end, the only interesting thing is that we're setting all of our we're setting the information on our mesh generator from our presets that we've pulled. Now we'll talk more about the node controller. So the node controller basically acts in 3 stages, which is the node controller, the node managers, which are on the each of the regions, and then the individual nodes. And basically, there's a number of functions that allow them to communicate between each other, like turning them on and off, adding the waypoints, checking whether you were clicked on, and building lines between them. But they basically just act as our point of reference to individual spots along the meshes that we've generated. One last thing is that we're clipping the edges of all of our regions to a single value. So we're clipping them all to like y equals 1. That's why it kind of flows together. They're not actually the same mesh, but it looks a bit nicer that way. Regions, and basically have them kind of stitched together as a pathway. So talking about the region presets a bit more. Basically, it's a structure that stores information that will pass over to our region generators that is actually going to create our mesh. It works decently well, but the thing is, I basically had to create the exact same structure on both the terrain generator side and the mesh generator side. And there's probably a smarter way of doing that, like using a dedicated class to store that information and then passing it over, like using a single equal sign instead of the big mess that we have here. Grouping regions. So we tried our hand at that. Basically, how the system determines whether to spawn a different region is that it takes the chance variable on the region preset and basically converts the sum of all those chance variables to a 0 to 100% probability scale. Now, what I tried to do is basically say if we had a higher coherence value, we basically give the system another chance. We take a random dot range again, based off of how many levels of coherence we had, and try to get a repeating region based off of what we had just put down. The problem with this is that although it works somewhat, as you can see by the pictures, it only accounts for the last index. It doesn't necessarily account for all the regions that are adjacent to the region we're currently generating. So talking about the node system. So the node system was my alternative to, or my solution to doing the roads and towns that I wanted to do. Basically, a node is placed at every vertex position, and the nodes sit in a class hierarchy of basically we have our node controller, which is linked to our terrain generator, and then we have node managers on each of our meshes for each region, and then we have vertex nodes that sit at the position of each vertex on the mesh, that are children of the region meshes. And to kind of try to avoid some like optimization problems, there's a bunch of toggles for turning off either like the mesh renderers of the nodes or just deactivating them. And basically, the point is that we can use these nodes as reference points for each of the vectors, and then jump board from that into like actually making specific changes to certain points on our terrain meshes. So talking about future improvements, first thing that I could look into is basically lerping, taking an average position along the edges of our regions. Right now, I'm just setting them all to the same value, and that's not necessarily an elegant or natural looking solution. We could begin editing the mesh positions using nodes, and then basically lerp between different nodes to kind of average out a path between them. We could use the A-star pathfinding to basically select two nodes and basically create a pathway that kind of spans between them. And then finally, I could start spawning the regions in like a cross pattern instead of a cube pattern. So right now the cubes spawn spawn at a set amount of basically whatever number is spawned, like to the second power, because it spawns that many in both the X and Z dimension. And if you wanted a specific number of regions, you currently can't do that because that's how the code is limiting you. That's it.